Hola, good day, ni hao, guten tag. My name's Doug Davis. Really excited to be bringing you a live webinar on decarbonizing the hospitality sector in the microgrid arena, as we're specifically focusing on the Caribbean. I personally think the Caribbean is really well suited to be a leader as we look towards the future and decarbonize the way we move around, the way we use energy, the way we air condition and create hot water. There's a great opportunity that really is available to us here in Puerto Rico. I'm not going to get into the long bios today, but we do have some incredible speakers. Ignacio's here from Glen International, who's been a real leader on the island with regards to renewable energy and moving the island forward with microgrids and more efficient ways of doing things. Javier also is going to join us. He'll be our first speaker. And he represents an organization called SESA of PR, which stands for the Solar Energy and Storage Association. We never really had an entity like this in the couple years that they've been formed, but they've done an amazing job of educating, helping policymakers lead our island forward to a renewable future. And lastly, we're going to have Christina, who hails from another island, not in the Caribbean, but in the Mediterranean, talk a little bit about the resources that the DOE has available to help small businesses and large businesses in the territories of the United States understand what opportunities are available to them and what tools are available to them to model and justify clean energy projects, which often end up looking like a microgrid of one type or the other. Again, my name is Doug Davis. I'm with a company called 2G, and together, you know, no one does a microgrid by themselves. It really does require a lot of talent of a lot of specialists in their field, whether it be PV, energy efficiency, engineering, cogeneration. And we really do, we hope today is impart to you some paths that you can implement to make your facility more resilient and more lowering in carbon use would be a simple way to explain it. So what I'd like now to do is to actually start a brief overview, next slide, of some basic key ideas. Kim, if you could forward the slide, please. Great. So, the hospitality industry requires reliable power to operate. I think one of the things I've observed about the Caribbean is almost every hospitality venue has 100% emergency backup, not because they want to, but because they have to. You really cannot run a hotel and explain to the guests that you don't have power for the next couple hours due to some issue beyond your control. So people today are already making investments in microgrids. They're just not what I would call a modern microgrid. They're sort of an old-fashioned way of having resiliency, which normally translates to some sort of an emergency diesel-generated power plant. What a microgrid is, technically, is a local energy grid with control capabilities, which means it can disconnect from the traditional grid and operate autonomously. And the neat thing about a modern microgrid is it happens in a blink of an eye. The grid falls off, and if a well-designed microgrid is in place, you don't really notice a difference. Life goes on. There's things you can do electrically with your controls and switchgear to basically make it a non-event for the guests. This April, we actually had an event called Decarbonize Puerto Rico, where we had a lot of leaders on the island talk about everything from the very rapid transformation to EV technology to what our clean energy goals are here in Puerto Rico. And it was really fascinating because I think when you bring all these different experts together, you start to see a clear picture of where we're going as not only an island, but as a world population. I think the one thing we've learned in these past 2 years is we are all connected, whether it's through public health or energy. What we do here affects others, and what others do in other places affects our life here in the islands of the Caribbean. So what we hope to do today is just impart a lot of local knowledge. This next slide, I think, is just an idea. I've started to see some customers grab hold of this, which is, where do I begin? How do I start the process of decarbonizing my hotel or resort? And like anything in life, what you can measure, you can manage. So a really good first step, and for not a lot of investment of even time or money, you need to kind of do a carbon assessment and take inventory of where are you spending energy on, and what does that energy look like? How clean is that energy? I think one of the unique things about the island of Puerto Rico is everyone's very aware of our aging infrastructure. And, this was an article in last week's newspaper talking about, maybe later this month, we're going to get a large power plant back online. But the reality is these power plants are well past their shelf life, so the goal is, what do we do next to replace these aging assets with something more clean and modern? We're still using coal here in Puerto Rico. We're using diesel, which were really the only fuels we had available up into fairly recent history. So the good news is we have a lot more clean fuels to choose from, and even in the future, a lot of renewable energy potential that we can harness to truly decarbonize Puerto Rico. Next slide. Again, decarbonization is kind of a new buzzword. I don't think was actually in anyone's vocabulary 5 years ago, but now it's being used quite a bit to communicate ideas. And I kind of like this picture, what I think will be the future of a modern microgrid, which is very different than today. I think a typical microgrid now in the Caribbean looks like solar power. Maybe it looks like some on-site energy storage. Maybe it looks like a diesel or maybe a clean fuel cogeneration system. All of these things are working together. But in the future, as we go more and more towards reaching our clean energy targets, we're probably going to have a lot more penetration of wind and solar and renewable energy forms that can actually create a fuel that we don't really have commercial access to yet. But I think by the time 2050 runs around, it will be kind of part of our vocabulary as well, which is hydrogen as a fuel source. So again, lots of moving parts. I'd say the only thing that differentiates some of these islands is we may or may not ever have a pipeline like we do in the States, where we transport and store energy through pipes. But what we do have is a great local transportation network of delivery trucks. Today, you can have cleaner, more efficient fuels delivered to your site via truck. And again, as you imagine the future, that truck's probably not going to be a diesel truck in 15 and 20 years. So again, the whole decarbonization of fuel transport is an opportunity for us here in Puerto Rico. Lastly, a lot of people might not be familiar with CHP or combined heat power, or sometimes in the Caribbean, we would call it combined cooling heat and power, since we often don't have a need for heat. And it's sometimes called cogeneration. I look at it very simply as it's an energy efficiency measure that any building can take if they have the right application. And in general, I think one of the reasons it's being advocated by both the EPA and the DOE is anytime you can change the building efficiency from roughly 50% utilization to something north of 75, that's a dramatic reduce of energy. So I always say to myself, cogeneration doesn't have to be complicated. The way I often look at it or describe it is it's basically creating power on site and producing free air conditioning or producing free hot water, for instance, in a hotel. So this little schematic here shows, again, a typical cogeneration unit hooked up to the grid, operating in parallel with the grid all the time, but producing other assets that the grid can't provide beyond electricity. Next slide. So lastly, before I introduce our first speaker, I just wanted to give you a short overview of 2G. We're a globally publicly traded company. We operate in about 55 countries, including Puerto Rico. We often look at ourselves as a service company. We largely want to service and take care of any equipment that we provide, wherever that is in the world. And we're really building that team here locally in Puerto Rico to service the Caribbean. We have about a half dozen projects currently running. And with that, I'd like to actually use the next slide to introduce our next speaker, which is Javier Rua from SESA. So please let me introduce Javier.
Hi to all. Thanks, Doug, for that. I'm Javier Rua from SESA. As Doug mentioned briefly, SESA, as you might know, is the home in Puerto Rico of all scales solar and storage companies, from utility scale companies to, which is like the large solar farms, to your companies that install your home solar and storage personal nanogrid in your house, but also companies that are in several spaces at once, like Tesla or Glenn, that are working in EVs, EV charging, and basically the technologies that are all these technologies that are synergistic and changing our world. So next slide, please. And as as the home of all these companies, our job is to make sure that the policies in the books are right, that all the obstacles towards this world, this decarbonized world that we want, these obstacles are erased, and the incentives, the right incentives, are in place to keep pushing this world that we want and that we need. And the main, and you know, we focus on that in policy, in the regulator, in the legislature, and companies should just focus on making money and being successful. And in that narrative, the main policy that I want to talk about is Act 17 or Law 17, which is Puerto Rico's renewable energy law, which mandates that Puerto Rico be fully based on renewable energy sources by 2050, and even more challenging by 40% by 2025. And that law really crystallizes the post-Maria consensus. You remember Hurricane Maria begat the longest blackout, power blackout in U.S. history. So, which cost thousands of lives. Also, many things became evident during that blackout, that Puerto Rico's paradigm of generation, of central fossil generation and long distance transmission doesn't work, didn't work, and will not work, and hence the narrative of all types of different microgrids, because all systems that are diversified are more resilient. And we're talking about large microgrids, and Doug briefly explained what a microgrid is, which basically surviving outside of the grid, without a grid, to your own personal microgrid or family microgrid, which I have in my house. I have solar and storage, and I also have a backup propane generator for survivability and resiliency. So, Act 17 crystallizes this narrative and this fact that we have to move in this direction. And at SESA, we focus on implementation of that law. And just to talk very directly to the audience here, and again, hi to all out there, the benefits of energy resiliency based on renewables and different flavors of microgrids are true for almost every economic operation, including hospitality. I would say every economic operation. One of the things that is critical from our perspective is the fact that solar interconnection, net metering, which is the operation that makes you save with every little bit of energy you put back in the grid that you don't consume, you're saving on that. That is getting a lot better. You might remember a past where PREPA would be a huge obstacle to getting interconnected and actually getting net metering and starting to save. Well, good news is that we're seeing, and we're really focusing on this, working with LUMA and with the utility and with the regulator, is that interconnection is doing a lot better. I can tell you that in PREPA years, just right before the handout or the handoff of the TND operation to LUMA, the grid operator now, systems that were up to 25 kilowatts, and that's not a small number. My system in my house is 7 kilowatts, so 25 kilowatts is several of those, and a modest system can be 5 kilowatts, so it's 5 of those. So 25 kilowatts is a nice system size, and right now we have a policy in the books that we're getting implemented of automatic interconnection up to 25 kilowatts, and what that means is that you call the company you want, that company will install, that company their professionals, their engineers or electricians will certify the compliance of that system, and that is simply notified to LUMA. And then there's an obligation by law there, Act 17 also, that in 30 days, net metering has to be turned on in your bill. I tell you, when I put solar in my house in 2012 to 2013, it took me almost 2 years to get net metering in my bill. Now we're seeing anecdotally, people getting it in weeks, but we're definitely seeing the average get closer to that 30 days, and we're seeing a horizon with numbers by LUMA numbers presented before the regulator. We're seeing a first semester of 2022, perhaps by February or March, up to date with this obligation. This is, you know, a sea change from the 8,000 cases that PREPA could simply not, you know, deal with, or would be lost through the cracks. So that's one thing. You could do, you know, in your parking, a carport that will save you money, and then you could get some of Iggy's chargers. So you'll talk about those, and that's a business model in itself based on clean energy, and also attractive to your business, you know, in your hotel, you know, to your restaurant and other amenities. So that's something to do. Carports are you can do carports up to 25 kilowatts, and that would be great, and also on your roof, etc. You know, we're also focusing on larger interconnection, over 25 kilowatts. There's the Puerto Rico statute, you know, and laws grant the right of net metering up to 5 megawatts, which is substantial. But then what we put in Act 17, and we're still working with the utility and with LUMA to get that truly implemented, is that those larger system interconnections have to be done within 90 days. Those are actually not self-permitted. Those are actually, you know, utility endorsements that have to happen. But, you know, once we get the smaller interconnections totally fixed by the first semester of 2022, and we're already starting to focus on the larger things, and that would change the world here, because these things are moving regardless right now. I mean, and people are finding the ways to, you know, build systems of all sizes and larger microgrids. You know, a larger company will, you know, a company that installs larger microgrids, perhaps commercial sized, over 25, 1 meg, 200 kilos, they will find you know, a willing off-taker. That could be a hotel, it could be a pharmaceutical, and do a contract. So these contracts are called power purchase agreements, but basically these things are just, you know, freezing forever your power cost in time with clean energy and other flavors of microgrids that you can freeze your power cost in time and save, make more money, and also get resiliency with you know, different technologies, including batteries, which are critical. So, you know, I wanted to drive that concept really directly, because, you know, you'll get savings from a stable PPA with your microgrid of any scale. You will get resiliency, which is survivability, being able to keep working and keep providing your services with your battery. And all of these operations are truly economical in Puerto Rico compared to the cost of power by the utility. So even without incentives, these things make sense in Puerto Rico, and they pencil out, because power is so expensive and unreliable. But then there's things like net metering, which I explained, and there's other incentives that we're working hard on federally and locally. Hopefully they'll start being true in predictable ways. I can tell you that right now there's one that the Department of Economic Development of Puerto Rico is starting out. I think in the slide there to my right, maybe to your left, I don't know, financial incentives. There's an incentive there called Refuerzo Económico. There's a link there. That's up to $25,000 for, you know, solar and storage and charging stations for small businesses. You know, the definition of small businesses varies. I think maybe up to 25 employees. But look into that. Just explore that link to see what applies to you or doesn't. The suppliers there have been certified. But if you're a small business, only small businesses as defined in those regs can be beneficiaries. But that's just one thing. And more hopefully will come. Before I stop, you know, one thing that's also important is SESA has been fighting against all the bad things some people that are against our world to push, including so-called solar taxes to pay the utilities debt. Within SESA, and if you join, look at our links, you know, it's power in numbers. It's you know, we can be more effective in fighting these obstacles that some want to put in our way. But history is on our side, and we're going to win. And you'll see how Doug I mean, what Doug said and what Iggy will said from Glenn about how these technologies are and will keep on changing the world. So we'll take some questions at some point, hopefully, but I think that's me for now.
Thank you, Javier. I wanted to make a quick update too from a housekeeping standpoint. If you have questions, we would invite you to write them in and we'll try to address them at the end. We're going to have kind of a fun panel discussion. In case you're not aware, this is the Caribbean islands. You know, a lot of people get confused about the Caribbean. It's very unique. You know, each island might have different rules, different regulations. So we'll kind of try to cover at least what we understand to be completely accurate. One of the reasons we've chosen this Glen facility to broadcast from is it is a microgrid. And they do net metering, which means Iggy will tell you what his last utility bill was here, but he is both producing renewable energy on site, using it, storing it, and sometimes even sending it back to the grid. So with that, I'm going to introduce Iggy Diaz from Glen International.
Good morning, everyone. Last energy bill was negative 500. So we actually have a credit now, which is a beautiful thing. And at the same time, we're charging Javier's vehicle and my vehicle with the sun, which is a great way of harvesting power. So, you know, I think that to both of you guys' point, we've come a long way. I mean, it is a new world here in Puerto Rico. We have incredible minds working on the future of our. So I'm really optimistic into the things that are coming our way. And I really do believe that hospitality, due to the pandemic and some of the other issues, definitely needs help. I mean, and we're here to do that. So, you know, if you don't mind passing for the next slide. So some of the things that we want to highlight, of course, is, you know, if we want to help an industry, is lower their cost of operation and at the same time find new ways of creating revenue or generating funding or money. So we'll talk a little bit about optimization of energy consumption in a facility. Then we'll talk about renewable energy generation and of course storage, which plays right with SESA. And then we'll bring up the new energy revenue or revenue for the hospitality industry, which is in the charging electric vehicles. The next slide, please. So one of the ways that we can always save energy is controlling you know, just energy consumption. And you know, one of the products that is phenomenal by brand is Lutron, but it's controlling illumination. So if you can find a way of controlling lighting by dimming or turning it off, or just control it by time usage, is phenomenal. I mean, you know, you have different products out in the marketplace, but you know, this product in particular actually goes to one solution called My Room, which actually integrates with the front desk of the property, and the rooms do not get turned on until the guest checks in, and that room is assigned to that guest. Now that is the ultimate in energy conservation. But of course, you also have the common areas. You have ways of doing it with motion sensing or occupancy sensing for you know, neutral areas like bathrooms or even lobbies, just increasing the quantity of light when you feel movement in the area. Same thing with the landscape or exterior illumination. But there's many ways of saving energy. In the case of My Room by Lutron, they actually do it even in the thermal side, so they control the air conditioning as well. And of course, while the room is unoccupied, they maintain that fan running so as to evade humidity or other issues that can damage some of the things inside the room. But this is a great way of saving energy. Next slide, please. And then, you know, go to the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit really means changing lamps. So if you change a lamp from incandescent to LED, you're probably saving 60% energy. Some of the fixtures, you can actually increase that from 60% all the way to 70% because our efficiencies in LED technology has gotten even better. So you can actually save even more. And the beautiful thing about this is that you're not sacrificing quality. The color conditioning index or the quality of the light can still stay above 90. And at the same time, the attenuation or dimming is flawless. If you actually dim with the right product, that's what we mentioned, that brand, but if you dim with the right product, you really don't get any flickering or any issues when you're controlling light. Always try to get the lumens per watt or the LPW in efficiency, which is in the slide, above 100. If you can imagine incandescent, lumens per watt, which is quantity of light per 1 watt of energy consumed in incandescent, was 18. Today with LEDs, we're above 100. So think of it as miles per gallon and just producing more for 1 gallon of gasoline or petrol than what you would, right? So it's just efficiency. Next slide, please. And we always have the option whenever we don't have electricity at a perimeter of a property, a hotel, for security purposes, or just pretty much just to be compliant, because many flags do require you to have a certain amount of foot candles or luxes at the property for safety factors when people are walking in the property at night. You can always do it with solar LED. So you have solar LED options, whether you do it in poles or you do it in bollards or you do it wall mount like wall packs. There's a lot of options with that. And of course, since solar has gotten so much better, we can generate more energy with a smaller panel. And then the batteries going to lithium, lithium phosphate, lithium ion, these batteries are long life. So you're sometimes looking at 10+ years of life with these batteries. So these solar LED solutions have come a long way, and they actually have come down in cost. So it's actually very nice. And of course, since there's no cabling, it's very easy to implement. In the time you get sun hitting that area, you just put it against a wall or put it on the floor and you're ready to go. Next slide, please. And now we're going to the generation side, right? So we optimize the property, we make sure that we're consuming the least possible without sacrificing quality for our customers. And now we go to generate. Now, remember something, and this is something that we always bring up to our customers. Whenever you're gonna go to generation, it's gonna cost 10x what it costs to conserve. So always try to conserve as much energy as you possibly can. Look at the thermals, look at your air conditioning, look at the building envelope. Stop wasting energy when you're cooling the property. Look at all of these factors prior to going to generation. And then you go to generation. Generation is gonna cost you 10x what it costs to conserve, okay? Next slide. So here we go to generation, and you have different reasons why people go to generate energy. One of them is, because the energy is very expensive. I mean, you have some islands in the Caribbean that are charging 45, 46, 47 cents kilowatt hour. Then it just makes sense. Fill up that roof with solar panels because the return on investment is going to be very, 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 very fast. The property on the top left slide is actually in the Caribbean. Probably nobody knows where it is. You guys know because we discussed this yesterday. But that's the Westin in San Martin. And interestingly enough, Hurricane Irma went through that property, destroyed the whole property, and the panels were still there. So property, I think, is just opening now, but the solar system is up and running and working beautifully. And then you have the Mandalay Bay in the bottom. Of course, Vegas has a huge amount of solar power because it's in the desert. But then you also have some of the properties that want to do this to make a statement, and they want it to be visual. So they want the guest to come into the property, and when they're walking in to go, wow, I'm in a green hotel. So they put them on a wall, or they put them right next to the pool, and people can see it as they walk in. And then you have other ones that look at harvesting. I mean, we did that at the convention center here in Puerto Rico, where we ran our energy event just last month. And that event it was an event that hosted 460 people, and it ran at CO2 negative. So we had 100% of the energy was generated by the carport at the convention center, which is a beautiful thing. But here you have carports which are providing shade for the cars and at the same time generating energy. You can actually tie this to your property. So if you're not utilizing it to charge cars, you can use it then in your property as a credit to your facility. But again, more and more we're seeing this being utilized. Sometimes most of the time, hotels do not have a capacity in the roof to generate enough for the property. I would say 99% of the time. So they have to actually move outside of the rooftop to create a carport or something else to try to increase the capacity of generation. And in this case, you can see it actually in that Holiday Inn property down in the bottom of the slides. Next slide, please. And then you have the storage factor. Now, solar has gone down in price tremendously. We've seen solar go down in price in 10 years from $5 a watt to 50 cents a watt, which is substantial. It's actually today the cheapest energy source in the world, even cheaper than nuclear. Now, storage, we're seeing that same trend happen now with lithium phosphate and lithium ion. So as we're moving down on those costs, this is becoming a great alternative to perhaps protect electric components by connecting it to a microgrid type environment, being always powered by an inverter with a battery system, like what you see there enclosed in something that looks like a generator. Sometimes people place these things without even having solar energy. They just grab energy from the utility, put it on the battery, and then they get their clean battery through an inverter into the restaurant, into the bar, or into the property, just to not have to deal with surges that damage electronic equipment or thermals like refrigerators, freezers, or other equipment. So this is a great alternative. They have actually shrunk down in size. This product in particular, which is from a company called Gridbox, 10-year warranty, 20-year life. So interestingly enough, a 10-year warranty on a system with a battery is pretty neat. Next slide, please. All right, so now we move into the electric vehicles. Now, guys, this is coming whether we like it or not. So as you can see from that slide, every brand is in it. And they're not in it to save the world, right? So you have some incredible vehicles that are coming online. It's not Tesla, Nissan, or Lucid anymore. It's everybody, every brand you have out there, from Europeans to American vehicles to Chinese, Japanese vehicles, everybody's jumping in. Next slide. And as you can see, it's happening not because they want to save the planet, like maybe some of us do. It's because the numbers talk. Cost of lithium is coming down, so the manufacturing of electric vehicle probably by next year will be cheaper than manufacturing an internal combustion engine car. So by 2025, we're going to have more than 50% of the vehicles or cars will be electrical. By 2030, it will be a huge challenge to actually find a new internal combustion engine vehicle because most of the cars will be electrical, definitely over 80%. So this is a huge business, as you can see in this slide that we're showing. And most of the people are switching, not because this is all of what they have available, it's because it just makes financial sense. Riding an electric vehicle will cost you, here in Puerto Rico, where the energy is 20 cents kilowatt hour, 4 cents a mile. While you're driving a gas vehicle at $3.30 a gallon, which is more expensive than that, but let's put it at $3.30 a gallon, and you have a car that gives you 20 miles per gallon, which is not that SUV V8 that you have in the screen, is 17 cents a mile. So if you're saving 13 cents per mile on just pure transportation, that's huge. And then in the bottom, you can actually see that you're reducing the cost also by having no maintenance. I mean, you have really no oil change, no filters, no belts, no anything. I mean, it's a lot less moving parts. And if you can actually implement solar in your property, whether it's here in the office where I charge my car with the sun, or whether you do it at home, then that cost per mile actually goes down to zero. So you're actually harvesting your own energy and putting it in your tank or in your battery. Next slide, please. So, you know, EVs have incredible opportunities for hospitality market. One of them is what we're seeing here. If you have a charger in your property, it attracts people to go to that property, whether it's people that are renting a vehicle or own an electric vehicle, they will go and park there because they can charge the car there while they're staying at your property. But the other one too, it increases traffic for the restaurants, for the bars, and for anything that you have in that property, because people can leave the car there. So I can leave the car there and go and visit the restaurant, whether it's Morton's or whatever, and have a nice meal. And by the time I get out, I actually have more power in my vehicle than when I came in. So that's a beautiful thing. And imagine you're actually double dipping on your revenue stream. So you're charging for the parking, but at the same time, you're actually charging for the energy as well. So this is a very attractive thing for vehicles. Now, the other opportunity for hospitality, for the property, the other opportunity for the property or for the hotel is actually on changing their fleet. And of course, you have a lot of companies like Amazon, IKEA, UPS, FedEx, and all these companies are changing their fleet to electrical. They're not doing it to help the world. They're doing it because it makes financial sense. Look at the cost per mile. And of course, they have a lot less maintenance. So that means that those cars are operating more. Now, the same thing is happening with hotels, shuttles, and other, other vehicles within these properties. They're looking at doing it because it's less maintenance, less money, and they can charge it right at the property when they get back from the airport or wherever they're taking customers. Now, you're even seeing, we're seeing this right now. Go back real quick, one slide. We're seeing this right now even at the highway authority here, Metropistas. Metropistas is looking at, they have a 1 meg solar canopy going up in Buchanan, but at the same time, they're looking at changing their fleet of pickup trucks to go electrical because they can charge it with that solar canopy, and they will reduce their dependency on gasoline and at the same time be a lot greener. So it just makes perfect sense. Okay, next slide. So to talk a little bit about equipment, you have, when you're looking at charging stations or charging those vehicles, and of course I cannot cover it in the next 2 minutes that I have left, but you have a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. The level 1 is what we call 120, or a regular receptacle that you have at home. Level 2 is what will be a 240, which is actually a dryer, like imagine your clothes dryer at home, or your oven most of the time runs on 240. So that's that plug, which is a little bit bigger. You can actually see it in your screen. And then you have the DC fast charge, which is a whole different level of product and is quite expensive. So of course, the more energy you can put in the vehicle, the faster it charges. Level 1, most of the people don't use it because it takes too long. That's what comes with the car. So you will always have one in your trunk. It's very little. It's just a little plug that you plug on a receptacle and it charges. But it takes 17 to 25 hours to charge your car. Now you have the level 2, which charges 2 to 8 hours. Now this is a favorite of the hotels. Why? Because you want people to stay there. By the way, this is the same that is favorite for shopping centers, because you want people to stay at the shopping center and go to Cheesecake Factory and go shopping and spend money on the property. So 2 to 8 hours, which is that level 2, is the industry favorite right now. And then you have the level 3. Now, level 2 will cost you $1,500 when you want it intelligent. A level 2 that is very basic will cost you around $500, which has no intelligence to it. So they have no way of documenting who consumed the energy and charging them accordingly. The level 2, of course, the intelligent does. That's why it costs $1,500. But then you look to the level 3, which is that DC fast charge. Charges very fast, 13 minutes all the way up to 1 hour. But it costs $100,000 each unit. So the return on investment is really tough. We just installed 2 of these at Porsche here at Kennedy, at the Porsche dealership here in Kennedy. And they actually have the 175 kilo. They're able to charge a car in 12 minutes. But again, that's Porsche, and they do that for servicing those Porsche Taycans and the fleet of Porsche vehicles that are coming next online. But the typical that we see is a level 2 on the hotel properties. If you have valet parking, you can put a level 3 and charge high as a service. So somebody comes to the valet and they can go, we can fast charge your vehicle and have it 100% filled by the time you get back from your from dining, and increase that to the valet. Instead of being $10, they might charge $20 or $25. So it's just an opportunity to actually make a little more revenue. Next slide, please. So here is the equipment. You have on the left the level 2 chargers, typical. Again, that's 240, typically 32 to 40 amps running on each. This is usually not that hard to find that kind of energy or capacity at a property. So a lot of times we'll look at the panels or electrical load centers and see it. That's one thing that we do. We go and look at the capacity that you have left. Sometimes you have to do a load analysis to see what capacity you have left on those panels to see how many of these charging stations you can handle at your property. Now, when you go into the right ones, a level 3, which is a 480 volt 3-phase system, you can see on your screen that you have from 50 kilowatts all the way to 175 kilowatts. Well, when you look at the 175 kilowatts, that's over 300 amps. So typically, when you're running several of those, you have to actually put a substation behind it. So that's a lot more work. When you're looking at the level 2 charging stations, it's an easy way of stepping into this business and this industry, inexpensive, and again, generating extra traffic. Next slide. Now you go into the software. In this case, we're just putting an example of AMPA, which is the one we use mostly. And of course, you have a great app that is actually on your phone, and you can then turn that app on, scan a barcode, and immediately starts charging. On the left, you actually see a view of real-time charging that it tells you how fast it's charging, when will it be over. It actually sends you a text once the car is fully charged, so you can actually go and unplug it and move it to a regular parking. So again, this is incredible software. On the back end, it gives the property or the hotel constant reporting as to how much each one of these units is generating for the property. So it works out really well. Next slide, please. All right. This is my last slide, but it's something to keep an eye on. So we're not here yet. If you're looking at level 2 or level 3 charging stations, I write this down, make sure that they're all OCPP. OCPP means it's Open Charge Point Protocol. That means they're open architecture, which means that right now with 1.6, you can actually, they use any app of any company, whether it's Ampop or the Shell Green Lots or whatever, and charge for that energy with your credit card. But in the very near future, OCPP has announced the new version, which is 2.0. And version 2.0 matches your VIN number on your car to your credit card. So the minute you plug your car in, it will know what credit card to charge that energy, and you will not need any more of those scanning of software or QR codes at the charging stations, which is beautiful. Which, by the way, that's the way we'll operate in the gas stations as well with level 3. It will be OCPP 2.0, and you just plug it in and it starts charging, and your car will charge. You don't have to take a credit card or anything else. Now, the next generation, what we're seeing coming in 2020, 2022 will be the infamous V2X. Now, just to explain it plainly, V2X means V2, vehicle to grid, vehicle to vehicle, or more importantly, vehicle to home. The vehicle to home means that the battery in your car, at the same time you're charging through a charging station at home, you can actually provide energy back to your home if the power goes out. So, I mean, to be fair, in my car, I have 8 Tesla Powerwalls in the bottom between the 4 tires that I have in my car. That's a lot of energy, and that can power my home for maybe a couple of days. So imagine what we can do once we deploy this V2H. And then think, if you have extra capacity at your property, the fact that you could be selling energy in a storm like Maria, people could go to your hotel, charge their car, then at night take that car home, plug it in, and have energy running in their home at night if the grid is down. So I mean, it's amazing where this business is taking us. The business of energy is moving to a way that it will be, batteries will be on wheels, and you'll be able to take those batteries back and forward to your home and power your home or anything to it. All right, so last slide is to thank you. Thank you for your time. I guess I'll leave Doug running, but thank you for your time, guys. It's been a pleasure to spend a little bit of time with you, and I'm sure you can get in touch with us if you need any more information. Thank you.
Gracias. So Christina, you're up next from the great state of North Carolina.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone, and thank you. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about what is available now, all these technologies that the previous people discussed, and how we can make sure that they all work together and how can we implement them. So my name is Christina Kopitopoulou. I'm with the Southeast Combined Heat and Power Technical Assistance Partnership. It's a DOE program, and I'll go into a bit of more detail. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the state of microgrids in the US right now, and a bit of microgrids and CHP. I'm just going to touch on that because everybody else talked about it. A little bit of information about who the US DOE Combined Heat and Power Technical Assistance Partnerships are, what tools we have available, and different available resources. So next slide, please. So currently there are a number of microgrids in the US already. So there are 575 operating microgrids in the US. They provide about 4.3 gigawatts of electricity. Of those 575, 202 have CHP in them, and they provide about 2.4 gigawatts of energy. So as you can see, there are already microgrids in a lot of different places of the US, in Puerto Rico too, and in the British Virgin Islands. So there is a lot of existing technology and a lot of examples we can draw from to make sure that we do and we progress these types of systems. Next slide, please. So everybody talked a little bit about this, but CHP can really enable the other technologies because it is what we call a base load generation. So when you have your combined heat and power system or combined heat and cooling system, cogeneration system, that really offers you the base load generation you need to run your facility. And then you include all these other technologies like wind and solar, electric vehicles, you can have the battery storage, include all those together to create a much more sustainable and a much more resilient grid. And that really helps you shave what we call the peak demand for your facility, which is typically what you pay more for electricity, right? So once you shave that peak demand with all these different technologies, you can have very, very good economic payback, and you, of course, there's a lot more resiliency and reliability for your facility. So next slide, please. So what is the US DOE Combined Heat and Power Technical Assistance Partnerships? We are 10 partnerships within the US. I'm part of the Southeast, which is the orange one there. And we also cover 8 states of the US and Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. So we really focus on 3 things. We focus on end user engagement, and that means that we're partnering with the end user, for example, here with the hotel that is interested in looking at CHP. We try to offer really fact-based and non-biased engineering support. And we work with everybody. So we work with small businesses, we work with manufacturing, commercial, institutional, even federal facilities and campuses. We also do stakeholder engagement. That is the second part we really focus on. And that really has to do with talking to different regulators, utilities, policymakers. And we're trying to figure out if there's any barriers to CHP and how best to address those. So we really want to make sure that these technologies are able to be used in the different parts of the US, and that there's no unnecessary barriers that really stop the implementation of these systems. And then finally, we also offer technical services. We have a couple of things we do, and if you mind going to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about that. Thank you. So the first thing we do from our technical assistance is what we call a qualification screening. And that's really a very high level way of looking whether CHP works for the facility or not. If that works and the payback seems to be good, we do what we call an advanced technical assistance. And in this case, we can help figure out what the paybacks are, get a little bit more of information of actual direct costs from manufacturers, make sure the sizing is correct and the different type of technology that's being used is correct. And once we have done that and the results are still good, that's when the facility would be going to an engineering firm to do an investment grade analysis. So during that step, what we can do is also offer a third-party review of the analysis and make sure that the information that is provided is accurate. And if everything goes well and you're ready to go and install, we also can do a review of specification and bids to make sure that everything is included when you go and bid for manufacturers and the development companies. Next slide, please. So this is really what the screening looks like. It's a very high level assessment. What we're trying to figure out is CHP really a good technology for the site? To do that, we require energy consumption and cost from the facility. And then we calculate the estimated energy savings and payback, simple payback. And we size the CHP system and the technology. So depending on what you're looking at, you could be looking at a microturbine CHP system, it could be a gas turbine, it could be a reciprocating engine. So we look at what kind of technology really fits this facility better. And of course, we want to make sure that we take into account other additional information. Why is it that you are looking for CHP? It could be decarbonization, it could be increased resiliency, it could be just economics, it makes sense. And we want to make sure that we know the site's particularities, so we make sure we address those as we're looking through this screening. Next slide, please. So another tool we have in our toolbox that is available to everybody is a tool that was developed by the National Renewable Energy Lab, and it's called RIOT Lite. This is a tool that does an economic dispatch of different technologies. So what we do here is we look at different types of generation, and here we can include renewable generation like solar and wind. We also look at conventional generation, and this just means really the grid or diesel generators. We look at energy storage, and that's both battery storage, but also hot water or chilled water storage. And then we look also at CHP, and here you can see the different types of technologies for CHP. We want to make sure we know the drivers. So what are we looking to do? Are we really trying to minimize the cost? Are we trying to increase resiliency? Are we trying to reduce emissions? What's the goal really, the driver behind this? We take into account the economics, so technology costs and different incentives that may be available for the facility and other financial parameters. And finally, of course, we need the utility costs. So what are the energy charges where you are? What are the demand charges? What kind of escalation rates we should be taking into account? And finally, what we request from the facility would be their electric load and their heating and cooling load. So we take all this information and we plug it in the tool, and we can figure out what is the best mix of technologies for the specific facility. So it will give us, for example, solar and CHP, or it will give us storage and solar. We also get a optimal dispatch for the specific system that has been designed. And of course, we get then capital and operation maintenance costs and net present value. And next slide, please. So here I just wanted to show a quick example of what the results from the RIOT tool can look like. This is from a wastewater treatment plant we did in North Carolina, and NREL did the study. So I wanted to show this because, first of all, it is an opportunity fuel, so it's not just your typical natural gas or diesel generator. They are using biogas because they have that free and available to them. And what we looked at is, what are the needs if we want to withstand a 7-day outage? So this is the other thing the tool does. It gives you the financial feasibility, but it also tells you if you require resilience, how many hours of outage are you interested in? And let's figure out what kind of system is available or should be available to you at that point. So for this system, it's a 7-day outage system, and we looked at different technologies. So you can see on the first row, we're looking at CHP, PV, storage, and diesel. Now, the first column is really business as usual. The facility, as it is now, does use their biogas, but they use it in a boiler. They don't generate any electricity. And then we have the other two columns, and we're looking at the system from the RIOT tool and what the financial system would look like. So only based on the economics, and then the resiliency system. So what if you want to withstand that 7-day outage? So here, I'm not going to go through all this. We will be sharing the presentation so you can take a better look at it. But really what I wanted to touch on is first that, as you can see, we have fairly large systems. So in this case, we have an almost 500 kW CHP system. We have a 50 kW PV system, and then a 60 kW or 100 kWh battery system. And then for the resiliency, we still included the diesel generator. So as you can see, you can really implement a lot of different technologies. It doesn't need to be a one thing. So with all of them, we found out that the last one, which even includes the diesel, actually has the best results. So the other thing I wanted to point out here, since we're talking about decarbonization, is that as you can see on the CO2 emissions, year one, that is how many emissions were generated. So the business of usual, and then the last one, which is the resiliency, we actually saving about 1,600 tons of CO2 per year. So there is that reduction. And then there's also a annual electricity cost reduction. So between the first one, the 470,000 they pay per year, once you include the other systems, now you're saving about 155,000 a year. And then the net present value here, we'll see that the financial is the one that is really a good result over 25 years. There is a positive net present value. But when we're looking at resilience, because the focus is not just the financial anymore, but how can we make sure this facility stays online, we see that there's a negative NPV. But I want to point you the note below that if they were trying to do this only with their backup diesel generators, there would be a larger loss. So the NPV would be even a larger loss to them. So I'm going to leave it at here just because we're running a little bit out of time. Next slide, please. So I do have here a summary of resources that are available. And as I said, we'll share the presentation so you're able to look at all of this. We do, with the CHP TAP, really offers the services for free. So anybody can reach out to us from the 10 states we cover in Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. And we are happy to talk with you and figure out, what makes sense for you. Does it make sense for you? And again, there is no obligation, of course. So feel free to reach out to us, and looking forward to talking further. Thank you.
Gracias, Christina. That was fantastic. And again, nothing better than gratis. So before we kick off our panel discussion, I just wanted to let people know, yes, all these presentations are available to you. We'll make sure you get a package out. Please share with your friends. This is going to be an on-demand event in the future, so you can kind of watch it again or share it. So before I kick things off, I just wanted to finish with one slide. I call it modern microgrids: electricity, steam, domestic hot water, free air conditioning, any combination thereof. And I think the simple way to explain it is, turning the boilers off and turning the cogeneration systems on and integrating these resources so we can drive down carbon emissions, because it's not about one answer, it's about all these things put together in a creative fashion. So for the next slide, I wanted to just kick off a panel discussion. There are leaders in the hospitality industry. This happens to be a hotel on the west coast of Puerto Rico. They put in a small cogeneration system. It's working. It's got about 7,000 hours on it. I'm told one of the speakers that listened, or audience members today that tuned in, is actually putting in a very much larger system at his hotel in Ponce. Again, a great sign of leadership. You can do these things even in an island like Puerto Rico. So what I thought would be fun to do is just talk about, what is the next step for a place like this? Once you have something, whether it be a PV system or a small microgrid footprint, or a small planta that's, again, not an emergency generator, but a machine that's designed to run all the time. What does this mean to the hotel as far as the future and revenue and integrating? I think one of the things I learned from Iggy's presentation is, if we really see this rapid transformation to EV vehicles, the idea of charging is actually a much bigger opportunity. And again, if you have your own power generation, you don't necessarily need to increase the substation if you have a flexible behind the meter system that can accommodate people pulling in and out and wanting to charge their vehicles. So I'm going to now turn off my camera, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we could do. Again, just sharing ideas on topics ranging from PV to storage, something new to Puerto Rico called demand response, and how this can also harness and help the bottom line.
Well, just maybe to kick it off, you mentioned demand response and EV cars. EVs have batteries on wheels. One thing that seems like a huge opportunity for Puerto Rico is the fact that we have a lot of storage deployed already. There's like 35,000 up there, and these things can be coordinated and networked and aggregated, and they can be deployed upon demand by the utility. Wow. And it's super economical. That's something that's out there. It's not super high tech. It can be done, and it would save the whole society a lot. And actually, that's multiplied by the percentage of EVs, which are batteries and wheels, that we see in our highways and roads. EVs peptides 8 or 9 power, 450 is 10, 12. For the, a whole they have 12 power walks. I mean, each power walk is 30 kilowatt-hours. That cost is about $40,000, $50,000. So you're getting 12 batteries for price of 3 to go off grid for a week. What does that mean for utility? What does that mean for how we think about energy? Does it mean like an Uberization of energy transactions, actually, like you mentioned? Buying and selling peer-to-peer energy with telephones and apps. So it's a brave new world. We don't know exactly where it's going to land, but definitely.
Yeah, when I went to this site, actually, that's shown on the screen, and talked to the owner, what really motivated him to put this on was resiliency. And is he saving some money? Yes, he's saving some money. But I think in the future, he could also be saving fuel, right? By taking advantage of parking lots. I personally seek out trying to park in the shade now that I live in the Caribbean. It's wonderful. So I can see parking lots as being a really big business here in Puerto Rico because we have plenty of them. And again, the idea of harnessing and being able to deliver free fuel to vehicles is really attractive.
And I just did want to add, I don't know, I'm getting a bit of feedback. What I did want to add is that even though in my example, the net present value for the resiliency system was negative, that is obviously not always the case. It really depends on the specific facility. We have a number of facilities that have a positive, stream of a financial stream every year, even though they're just really sizing for resiliency. It just means that once, when the power grid goes down, which happens, it's better to have something that is designed to withstand those outages than having, a system maybe that cannot operate without the grid itself. Because that's the other thing that I think is important to distinguish between is that you may have solar, for example, of your roof, but if it's not designed to work without the grid, then you would still not have the power at that case too. So I think that's just important to mention.
Microphone.
I can hear you now.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, one idea that came out of the previous event was trying to use the AKs as a catalyst for deploying this technology. A small island, very manageable. You know, one thing I keep hearing from people in the world everywhere is trying to attract quality people and employees. So, you know, I can't imagine in the future, maybe part of your perk as an employee at a hotel would be a free electric vehicle that now can be a deployable asset, in essence, a rolling battery on wheels. Could actually allow a hotel to participate in a demand response in a much bigger fashion. My first introduction to demand response was working at a hospital where we'd sign up and we get $50,000 checks from the utility just to sign up. And they wouldn't actually ask us to do very much most of the time.
I also think, like, for example, to your sample that you have right on the screen, by putting a carport is minimally invasive. So you can put a carport that provides shade for the cars, generate all the energy. You can actually put one of those, grid type storage units right at the parking area. So if people are going to charge at night, you can charge on a level 2, not a level 3. So people can stay and spend money in the property as well. But with that kind of convenience will be phenomenal. And again, at the same time, you're providing shade, and maybe that extra 20% that the hotel does not have from your power plant, you can actually generate with renewables. Not to mention that what we discussed at the beginning of my presentation, which is optimization. If you can actually go in and look at the cooling or look at the lighting or look at the control side and lower your consumption 15-20%, you're at net zero right there without even the solar system.
Yeah, I think the idea of batteries becoming almost the hub of a microgrid is really critical, because even that white box on the right, while it can unload, let's say, from 300 kW down to 150, you know, that thing too has a perfect sweet spot for miles per gallon. So the idea that now we can make that power, put it in the battery, and then turn it off earlier and let the battery, you know, carry us through the evening is, again, all about flexibility, all about economics, and all about resiliency.
I want to highlight a couple of things that a lot of people perhaps overlook. One is cost of solar. We discussed it from $5 to 50 cents. That's a huge jump in the last 10 years. Cost of storage going from, I mean, it's gone down 90% in the last 6 years. 90%, the cost of lithium. So the cost of storage coming down dramatically. And at the same time, the capacity or the efficiency of the panels have gone from 200 all the way to 459, 500 watts. We're already seeing panels, each panel producing 550 watts each. So, of course, what we call the holy grail of solar, they're saying to get to 1,000 or 1 kilowatts of solar energy per panel. And if we get there, or when we get there, it's kind of game over. You put 4 or 5 of these in the roof of every house and you're done. And then look at the storage side, coming down at that level in cost. Right now, it's actually stabilizing a little bit because of the amount of demand of lithium that's going on in the marketplace. So the curve has slowed down a little bit. But I think as lithium continues to evolve, or the manufacturing of lithium, we're going to see that graph continue to go down pretty aggressively. So soon people are going to have, and of course, you all know, sizing has continued to decrease, right? So the vehicles, electric vehicles that we had 2 years ago were 200-mile range. Today, the Lucid has 525 miles with one charge. They're looking at the Ford doing 400. The Rivians are doing plus 400. So all of these vehicles continue to go up in range. So range anxiety goes away. In Puerto Rico, you really have a lot of range anxiety because we're 100 by 35. So it's not like you're going to drive around the island 5 times.
One thing, just to pivot of Iggy here, you know, besides the technological advancements and more efficient panels and cheaper by size, one thing that's really opening up the space is more financing options. I mean, some people will have the cash, you know, in their pocket, but some don't. So you know, financing has been pretty, you know, opened up a lot on the residential side. You know, companies like Sonova, Sunrun, and others, but Puerto Rico banks are getting into the fold. You have Oriental Bank, you have Banco Popular, you have Puerto Rico cooperatives, local savings cooperativas that are doing different types of you know, loans or to acquire these technologies. So that's important. That's happening. That's something that wasn't in place. You know, definitely a decade ago, it wasn't there. And then, of course, if you have some company that will sign a PPA with your business, that could be the financing mechanism. You know, it's like long-term contracts to build a microgrid or a solar storage microgrid. So all the planets have been aligning very well technologically, policy-wise, and these technologies are also driven by facts of climate change. So you know, it's a fact. It's not, we're again on the right side of history of technologies that battle climate change, save lives, and make you guys money.
The other thing that I wanted to highlight too is people don't understand the fact that, let's say you have a 500 kilowatt generator and you turn that generator on, but you're running at 100 kilowatt capacity. What happens with the extra 400? Today we waste it. If you actually include storage within that property, the extra capacity you have in there can be trickling charge or charging that battery system. So at the end of the day, you're harvesting that energy that you're not using out of that generator, which is one of the arguments that happens whether electric vehicles are better than gas vehicles, because people go, well, a lot of the generation that's happening is with diesel or with bunker fuel or with carbon. But at the same time, those generators at the utility sector, meaning a grand scale energy generation, are on. We're just not using it. So at the 3,000 megawatts of generation that we have in the island, at the time we're at 1,500 of utilization, meaning 50% capacity of our generation capacity. What happens with that other 50%? It's not landing anywhere. But if you have an electric vehicle, you're actually getting some of that energy in that car. So you're actually being more efficient because the generator is going to be on anyways.
Yeah, I think one of the stories I found fascinating in the island of Barbuda, which was wiped clean by Irma, you know, they ended up putting a new grid in. The new grid looked like mostly PV, one big battery, two small diesels, and the diesels are not really there to run except under weird events. You know, bad weather, something strange happened. So again, the idea of still needing diesels is absolutely imperative, you know, for life safety reasons, but the goal is not to deploy them and run them, you know, 4 hours at a fairly low operating efficiency point. Whereas if you have a battery, you could theoretically run it for 2 hours, charge the battery, and if you knew when the grid was going to come back on, turn it off. You know, I mean, I think one of the challenges with, again, education is these other generators and these other assets tend to make a lot of noise. You know, a modern package cogeneration system is pretty much whisper quiet. You're not going to hear it. So it's a very different animal, but again, it's part of the combination of technologies to decarbonize.
And just to mention something, we have decided and we already started to talk about Energy 2023. So we have another big event coming up in E2023. It will probably be around November of 2023, but that event will highlight some of the new energy options. So the infamous V2X, that meaning that by then we will have a bi-directional charging station that we will be able to.
Why infamous?
Because it is. I mean, if you think of it, it's kind of like another holy grail. The day that we can do that is the day everybody's going to turn to EVs, because it's just a life-saving situation where you can actually bring power to your home. I mean, look what happened in Texas with that storm that actually destroyed. People that had Teslas went to their Teslas and they sat on the Teslas, and that's how they kept warm and away from the storm. So, I mean, just imagine transporting that energy into the home. So, I mean, you know, that's going to be one. The other thing that we will be discussing at E2023 will be hydrogen. So we're going to be bringing experts from Israel and Japan that actually will be speaking into, because that by then we will have hydrogen options where the side what actually we get out of it is water. There's really no CO2 generation. It's just pure energy. It's beautiful.
Yeah, the hydrogen economy is certainly our future, as well as all renewables. So with that, we pretty much held to our schedule. Wanted to thank very much Christina, Iggy, Javier, and also Kim, who's been our master of ceremonies in Florida, which is where we operate our parts and service center for North America. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you all. Happy holidays.
Thank you.